It seems like you're in a position when we're asking to be out of the customs union, but in something which looks and smells remarkably like a customs union. Can you defend the position when people will say to you, well, is that what we voted for?
Oh, easily. I mean, on the one hand, we've got, as you said, people saying it's not enough. On the other hand, you've got the Labour Party saying it's have your cake and eat it. I mean, which is the criticism you should answer? It's a pretty simple, practical set of proposals that we put forward. I mean, primarily, you've got two elements to it. One is, of course, when we leave the European Union, we leave the customs union. The question is, you're going to have some sort of transition arrangement for a year or two, which will allow not just British companies to sell into Europe, but European companies who sell 60 billion more than us into the UK. So that's the first thing. Then, of course, the long-term arrangement. What do we do there? And we put up a couple of ideas, quite big ideas, as to how we might do it. But the biggest one, the first one we've listed, is about facilitating, using the techniques we already use in dealing with companies from outside the European Union who have to pay customs when they come here, using those same techniques that get containers through, 90% of containers through in a matter of seconds, use those sort of techniques to make our operation with Europe work well, work in a frictionless way. That's the sort of term of art that's used. So yes, it's very practical, it's very straightforward. Of course, we've got to negotiate it. Let's not kid ourselves.
That's the point I wanted to come to. It sounds exactly practical, it sounds straightforward, but what makes you think that Brussels are going to agree to this and say, yep, do you know what, you can have exactly that?
Well, because, I mean, this has been taken some time coming, because we have been in December of last year, January of this year, we were talking across Europe to a number of people about the advantages for them. I mean, we sell about 230 billion euros of goods and services to the Union, the European Union, each year. They sell 290 billion to us. I was in Bavaria only 2 or 3 weeks ago. They sell BMWs, they sell agricultural produce, they sell electronic goods. They have got an incredibly strong interest in something like this. So there is an interest on both sides of not doing each other harm, if you like, both to do with customs arrangements, but also to do with having a free trade area in the first place. All of those things, there's a strong common interest to. Now, that being said, there are people who politically say that this has got to be looked at very hard. Okay. But what's interesting, someone like Guy Verhofstadt, a very vocal critic and somebody who represents the European Parliament in these negotiations, has not said there shouldn't be a transition period. He said it should be limited. We agree. He hasn't said that there shouldn't be a deal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go across and talk to each of them and say, this is what we think is in our interest, but what we also think is in your interest.
How are those negotiations actually going? I know they restart in a few weeks' time. Yeah. Are they more difficult? Be honest with us. Are they more difficult than you thought they would be?
No, they're pretty much as I expected. I said right through the last several months in the run-up to it that there will be turbulent periods. There'll be bumpy times. You know, we will have public differences of view, as we've already had, and of course there'll be some point scoring as people try and sort of promote their own position. That's a negotiation. You know, that's the sort of that. You know, this is probably the most complex negotiation in history, which we've always recognised. It's a tough one. There are 27 different national interests. That's before you bring the Commission and the Parliament into it. So, of course, it's going to have some bumps along the way. But at the end of the day, the driving thing to remember is that there's a strong common interest in getting a good outcome. And you know, if you go into a business negotiation, as I've done any number of times, what you're looking for is the outcome that helps both sides. And that's exactly what we're doing here.
Okay, also, as you mentioned those 27 different sort of nation states, 27 different people who need to agree with your point of view as well.
That's right.
On that's one side of it, that negotiation with the EU. Back home here, it's been reported that this is a success for Philip Hammond's point of view, the sort of Chancellor's stance on. You're smiling. I'll ask you why in a moment. But can you please tell us? I understand there are certain things you can't go into great detail, but what is the situation in the cabinet? Is there an irreconcilable split of two sorts of opinion, one with Philip Hammond and the other with sort of Boris Johnson and others in that area, and they cannot see eye to eye, and this is actually ripping the Tory party apart?
No, I mean, the reason I was smiling was because you've got two Murdoch papers, the Times saying it's a success for Philip Hammond and the Sun saying it's a victory for Liam Fox. So so, you know, take your pick, you know. What I think of is that this is a victory for common sense. What you've got in Cabinet is everybody wanting a good deal for Britain. That's the unifying aspect of it. Of course, there are different views on elements of the deal because departments have their own specific interest. Treasury is obviously concerned about the city. BEIS, Business, Energy and Industry, are concerned about things like research and manufacturing. They have their different views. Liam, of course, wants to be able to do his trade deals. My job is to make sure that we do all of those things in a practical way that works, but also in a way which is negotiable, that we can get actually an outcome for. We're not pitching for the moon. So, of course, there are discussions, and of course there are interests, but we all want the best outcome for Britain.
And I've got to mention, right in the introduction, we said that from the Labour Party point of view, Keir Starmer said this is incoherent and inadequate. How do you answer that accusation?
My answer is to look at the Labour Party's press release this morning, which describes a proposal which is basically a summary of our proposal, as what they want to do. Of course they're going to take that stance. You know, the ancient thing about Mandy Rice Davis, my sort of namesake, the Davis, you know, they would say that, wouldn't they? Unfortunately, from the Labour Party's point of view, they've had 7 different positions on all of this over the course of the last 12 months. This is a carefully worked through. It's taken 12 months to put all this together, to test it out with lots of business groups and test it out with various other interested parties and test it out with the people who are going to deliver it. It's the practical outcome that we're seeking, and that's what matters. That's what matters to the people, and that's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the Labour Party. I am concerned about delivering for all of Britain a decent outcome.
David Davis, thank you for your time this morning. All the best for that next round of negotiations at the end of the month. Thank you.
You are watching Breakfast.